Now, this was by far the worst news that I had received since arriving in China. Okay. Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Nadine and I have lived in China for the past 10 years. And I like to make vlogs and videos about our everyday life, about living in China. And recently I started this series where I share some stories about 10 years ago when I first moved to China. So I hope you enjoy. So this is going to be episode 5, and this one is called My New Town, Liaozhong. So we left Shenyang and we were now driving through heavy industrial areas. Miles and miles of open fields just stretched as far as the eye could see. We drove for close to an hour through just the deserted rural areas of China, sometimes passing farms with little houses. And at that point, I did not know how the people living in those houses survived the cold. The sun was starting to set and it made everything look dead and gloomy. We passed over a bridge that runs over a big lake, completely frozen. It was the first time in my whole life that I had seen a completely frozen lake. Mayna told me that in summertime, everyone spends a lot of time by the lake, having picnics, rowing on the lake, or just walking around on the paths. It sounded really nice, certainly much nicer than what I was experiencing at that moment. Now, I want you to keep in mind that I just came from South Africa where it was summer, and even in South Africa in winter, it doesn't get that cold. So for me, arriving in China in the middle of winter, I think was the worst time for me to arrive, because in Shenyang, it's freezing cold. It gets to be as cold as minus 25 degrees Celsius. It was cold. Of course, in winter, there's no greenery. You know, everything looks dead just like it does in winter. But I think what made it so much worse at the time was just the fact that it was so unbearably cold. So this in itself was a huge shock to me. And everything else that was just new and unusual and strange, it just made the shock so much worse at the time. So as soon as we crossed over this bridge, it then became apparent that we were now entering my new town. It was much smaller than Shenyang. The buildings were much different because there were no high-rise buildings. I think most of the buildings only went as high as maybe 6 or maybe 8 floors. And also the buildings just looked completely different than what I had just seen in Shenyang. And also keep in mind that I had no idea that I would not be living in Shenyang city. No one had told me that I'm going to live in a small town outside of Shenyang. So we dropped Ms. Han somewhere off on a random spot, and then Mayna told me that we have to go to the police station first to register me as a resident, and then we would go back to meet everyone else. Now, upon arriving at the police station, I found it very strange that Mayna did not pull into the parking lot. Instead, she just parked her car in the road. And not only that, she parked right in front of the entrance of the parking lot of the police station. I was so afraid that they would tow her car and all my belongings were in there. But she didn't seem bothered with where she was parked. It was just like, there was nothing. At the police station, the officers did not know what to do with me because they had never had a foreigner living in their town. So to register me would be quite a challenge to them. Now, if you don't know this, foreigners who come to China, you have to register your residence with your passport and all your things within, I think, 48 hours of arrival. So because no foreigner had ever lived in this town, I think like the system just had no option to put in the details of a foreigner. So because of this, they told us to come back on Monday. We went outside and sure enough, her car was still there and no one seemed to care that she parked practically in the middle of the road. And it was then that I saw for the first time that over here, or in Liaozhong at least, you can make a U-turn at any point in time you feel like it. And no, you don't have to actually wait for the oncoming cars to pass. You just kind of turn in front of them. They will honk and flash their lights at you, but they won't get really angry. It also helped that the speed limit was between 40 and 60 kilometers an hour. This is a really small town. Now, I think I haven't mentioned this before, but I came to China as a cultural exchange person, like a cultural exchange program where I would kind of be living with people and sharing my culture and enjoying the culture of China being shared to me. And all of the people that I lived with at the time just happened to be English teachers, okay? So at this point, we drove to a school. And then once we got there, it was freezing inside. So we went into one of the classrooms, and then Mayna introduced me to some of the people that I would be living with. They all had English names, but I had already forgotten them 2 minutes later. There was just so much going on, I could not keep track of any new names or faces. And then, of course, a bunch of kids started coming in, and they were super excited to see me. And it quickly became apparent to me that I'm pretty sure the majority of people in this town had never seen a foreigner, because no foreigner has ever lived in their town. That's like the first thing that gave it away to me. And I feel like that's where they lived, right? Where would they go to see foreigners? It was a very, very small town. So my presence was like a huge treat to them. And also, one thing to note is at the time I had platinum blonde hair, which was also quite interesting to see, I think, at the time. So that night I met so many people, adults, teenagers, young children, and the things I heard the most that night was, "Nice to meet you, you are very beautiful, what is your favorite animal, and what color do you like?" And at this point, I wasn't sure if they just learned phrases or if that's just what they were curious to know about me. Now, even though the people that I would be living with, they were all English teachers, it was still very hard just having a conversation with them because I feel like they didn't really understand what I was saying. So I was just all around confused in so many different ways. So a little while later, Mayna then introduced me to her boyfriend, and I replied, of course, with, "It's nice to meet you." So Mayna and all the other girls, they started laughing hysterically, and she said, "Oh no, Mr. Chen doesn't speak English." I don't know why, but at that time, I found that extremely funny. Now, during the whole evening, I could no longer hold my bladder and I had to go to the bathroom. I asked Mayna where the bathroom was and she showed me how to find it, and she handed me a roll of toilet paper, which wasn't on a roll. It was literally just a roll of toilet paper. So I entered the bathroom and I was now facing 2 stalls. And each one had some Chinese character on it. And I was standing there trying to figure out which one is for boys and which one is for girls. So I kind of just played bathroom stall roulette and I just chose one. And as soon as I opened the door, I stopped dead in my tracks because I had heard of this, but I had never seen it before. And this was my first time that I saw a squatter toilet, okay? In the Asian countries, I assume this is a very common thing. It's not unusual. It's normal. Even today, when you go places, it's not unusual to see this in public places. But as a Westerner, this was like, wow. My first reaction was like, whoa, like what's going on here? So I was staring at this squatter toilet for a while and I just decided that I didn't know how to use it and I left again. But after about 30 minutes, I really couldn't hold anymore and I had to go. So I decided to go and take a look again and see if I could figure out how to do this. I stood there for about 5 minutes just assessing the situation, trying to calculate things. And I was completely dumbstruck. I don't know how one would go about doing this. I would probably end up peeing everywhere except in the hole. So I just decided against it and I left again. I was so relieved when Mayna told me that we could leave, and when we left, she handed me a teddy bear and she asked me if I liked it. She was very excited when I said yes, and then she told me that she had gotten it for me. I thought that was really sweet. So now Mr. Chen picked us up again and we went to a restaurant to eat dinner. I was super exhausted and now it was dinner time and they handed me chopsticks. I don't recall ever using chopsticks before that because I never ate Chinese food in South Africa. I don't see any other reason why you would need to use chopsticks unless you're eating Chinese food, and I never ate Chinese food. So Mena asked the waiter to bring me a knife and a fork, but I just decided, you know what, I'm gonna insist on using my chopsticks because I'm in China, so I will eat with my chopsticks. So at this point, they brought us hot water and poured each of us a tiny cup of water. And at first I was kind of looking around, trying to figure out, is this like, am I supposed to do something with this? Am I supposed to rinse my chopsticks with it? Is it like, am I supposed to rinse my bowl or my hands or something? What am I supposed to do with this? But then suddenly I recalled what Jack had told me about how they drink hot water here. Now, at the time when he told me that, I really took it as only some people do it. So I looked over at Mena and she was sipping on her little cup of hot water. And when I say hot water, I mean like really hot water. Okay, there's like steam coming out of that cup. She was taking small sips because it was boiling hot water. Now, this to me was very strange because I had never had hot water, even lukewarm water. Where I'm from, you drink cold water. The colder, the better, right? So I figured I've never tried that. I'm not ready yet. So I just pushed my cup aside. I would figure out the hot water thing a little bit later. So on this night, we had a kind of bing that Mena called like a beef pie. She also referred to it as a Chinese hamburger. So it almost looked like a flapjack with a slightly different texture, and it was filled with ground beef and vegetables. Now this is now I know, it's like a neuro bing, okay? It's super yummy, but it's very oily. She also ordered a plate of chopped mushrooms accompanied by some sort of green leafy vegetable and a bowl of sweet soup. Now, everything tasted really, really good, except for the soup because I'm just not a soup person. Now, this bing was quite heavy because it was like pastry with meat inside. It was literally like heavy. And the mushrooms, because they were in some kind of sauce and they were chopped, they were also very slippery. So all of this just made it really hard for me to eat with my chopsticks. And also, if you use the takeaway chopsticks, the little wooden ones, those are so much easier to use because, you know, this kind of more grip on your food. But the fancy restaurant chopsticks, even to this day, is not very easy to eat with those because they're very smooth and, you know, your foods can slip out of your chopsticks very easily. So this just made it really hard for me to eat my dinner, although everything tasted amazing. So, of course, Mena and Mr. Chen, they were like eating like nothing because they are chopstick masters. So after 2 of these neuro bings, about 5 pieces of mushrooms and a few leafy vegetables later, I was stuffed. The food was really rich and quite filling. Now, as soon as dinner was done, I was told we can go home and I just could not wait. Okay, I just needed to find out where am I going to live, what's my house going to look like, my room, my bed. I just wanted to rest, okay, at this point. That's all I really wanted. So we drove for a short while again, and then we pulled into this really, really dodgy looking block of buildings. And I was just sitting there praying that this is not where we're gonna be living, and it was. So we unloaded my bags, and Mr. Chen, he went a little crazy. He decided that it was a good idea to pick up my bag over his shoulder and carry it up 4 flights of stairs. Now, this bag was extremely large and heavy, trust me. I'm pretty sure he had like back problems the next day. Now, like I mentioned, we had to go up the stairs because these buildings had no elevators because they're not high-rise buildings. So the stairway, the actual stairway leading to our house, it was not so great. I can't really explain it. It just looked like they started building, but they never rounded things off. And when we reached our front door, I couldn't help but smile because the front door looked like a bank vault door. I didn't know at the time what kind of criminals they were trying to keep out by having these heavy kinds of doors. And the door also didn't have a handle. You just put your key in and you unlocked it and then it swung open. Now, on the other side of the door were even more complicated gadgets. It honestly looked like a bank vault to me. So at this point, she led me upstairs to my room and we passed by the bathroom. So I was so relieved when I saw a normal toilet in there. She showed me all the new things that she had bought me, including a mattress, which she said that she had bought especially for me, like a nice thick mattress. But I think, you know, my idea of a thick mattress and maybe her idea of a thick mattress were 2 different things. So she had bought me this mattress a duvet and some sheets, and then the curtains also matched the sheets. There was a little table and a coat rack and a type of basket as well. So we put the sheets on my bed and she told me to rest. So I unpacked a little bit because living out of a suitcase was just not my thing. But I got really tired halfway through and I decided to just leave it the rest until the next day. So at this point, I spoke to my mom on Skype for a little bit and we didn't talk too long. And then I decided to just take a shower and go to bed. So I stood by my door because I heard someone was busy in the bathroom. And I stood there for a while wondering how long they would take because I was living with 4 other girls in this house. So obviously we would have to take turns to, use the bathroom. There was only one. So I'm standing by the door trying to figure out how much longer are they going to take. And then suddenly it just dawned on me, okay? Whoever was in the bathroom was not taking a shower. They were doing laundry by hand. Now, this was by far the worst news that I had received since arriving in China.